I didn't think much about it at the time. Just another late night at school, another excuse to stay behind because it was better than going straight home. The haunted house setup was just a formality. Stacking cardboard, draping fake cobwebs, taping up black sheets to make the hallways feel narrower than they were. Nothing complicated. Nothing special. The real appeal was the time. The unspoken permission to linger, to stretch the night a little longer. A few of us stuck around for the usual reasons. Free pizza, an excuse to goof off without adults breathing down our necks. The weird sense of independence that comes with being in a half-empty school when the halls are supposed to be silent. He was there too. Liam. I hadn't noticed him at first. Not in any meaningful way. Just another kid in the mix. Just another familiar face in a sea of half-familiar faces. I barely remember talking to him, but I must have. He must have been close enough, long enough for me to say something that stuck with him. I don't remember anything standing out. No meaningful conversations. No moments that should have meant anything. But apparently, they did. To him. It's strange, looking back, trying to retrace those nights. I search my memory for anything. A look, a tone, a detail that should have set off alarms. I come up empty. Because to me, he was just there. And I had no idea I'd already been noticed. It started with a group of girls acting weird. The kind of weird that sets off a quiet alarm in the back of your head. Like you've just walked into the middle of a conversation where your name was the punchline. Whispering, giggling, watching me in that way people do when they know something you don't. A secret admirer. That's what they said. Someone who'd been watching, waiting, finally ready to say something. It was just gossip to them. Something fun, something to make the day feel less like a routine. They said it like it was good news. Like I should be excited. I wasn't thinking about it by the time I got home. It barely felt real, just another schoolyard thing that would be forgotten in a week. But then my phone lit up. Messenger notification, late at night. That alone was enough to make my stomach drop. I almost didn't open it. The name barely registered at first. Liam, had I even added him? Maybe during one of those automatic syncs, maybe he had added me. Either way, the message was there, waiting. And it wasn't just a message, it was long, too long. Not just words, but feelings. Rambling, confessional, obsessive, talking like there had been something between us all along, like I should have seen him the way he saw me. Like my silence had meant something, like it had hurt him. I sat there staring, feeling something cold settle in my stomach. How was I supposed to answer something that didn't make sense? Something changed overnight. Before, Liam had just been there, blending into the background like everyone else. But after the message, he wasn't just there anymore. He was watching, not in an obvious way, not enough to call it out without sounding paranoid, but enough that I started noticing. The way his eyes followed me across the room, the way he always seemed to be nearby, whether I was at my locker, heading to class, or just standing in the cafeteria. I'd turn a corner, and there he was, too often, too close. And then came the questions. Always the same ones, over and over, like he couldn't accept the answers I gave. Why? Why not? Why couldn't I just try? Every response felt like stepping deeper into something I didn't understand. Every reason I gave just became another reason for him to argue, push, insist. Then there was the time he grabbed my wrist. Just for a second, tight, deliberate, long enough for me to feel it, long enough for my stomach to twist in a way I couldn't explain. Not hard enough to bruise, not enough for anyone to see, but I still remember the way his fingers felt against my skin. I still remember the way I yanked away. After that, I started walking faster. I stopped taking certain hallways. I learned the patterns of the school in a new way. Not for shortcuts, not for convenience, but for avoidance. I told a teacher. I kept my voice steady. She barely looked up. Just keep your distance, she said, like that had ever been my choice. By the next day, everyone knew, or at least it felt like everyone knew. Whispers in the hallways. Sideways glances. Smirks. It wasn't just his friends anymore. It was people I barely even spoke to. My classmates. Strangers. People who shouldn't have cared. They weren't just whispering about what happened. They were talking about what was going to happen. how he was going to kiss me, how he told everyone he was going to do it, whether I wanted it or not. The way they said it, some laughing, some with a weird sort of expectation, made my stomach drop, like it was some inside joke I wasn't part of, like they were all just waiting to see how it would play out. I stopped eating in the cafeteria, stopped walking the usual routes, stopped lingering anywhere that felt too open. Lunch became a quiet thing, done close to a classroom door or at the back of the library, away from where people gathered. The school, which had always felt too small, suddenly felt too open, too exposed. But it didn't matter. I could hide from people, but not from him. The messages still came, every morning, without fail. "Can't wait to see you today." I started dreading my phone before I even opened my eyes. I thought I was safe at home. I wasn't. The knock came minutes after I walked through the door, like whoever it was had been watching, waiting for me to step inside. The sound of it froze me. Just for a second. It wasn't normal. Not the way it came, sharp and deliberate, not like a delivery, not like a neighbor. Something about it felt wrong. I crept toward the window, moving slow, barely breathing, and peeked out, just in time to see it, a shape ducking behind a parked car across the street. My heart started hammering. I knew before I even checked. I knew who it was. Before I could do anything, the door was already opening. I didn't even think, just stepped forward. Looked down. A note. Sitting there, waiting for me. My name scrawled across the front. I didn't want to touch it, but I had to know. My hands felt clammy as I unfolded the paper. "There's a surprise for you under the truck in the driveway." I couldn't move. I didn't want to check, but I knew someone had to. My mom was in the kitchen, and I knew if I told her she'd check herself. I didn't want that either, so I forced my legs to move, forced myself outside. Nothing. There was nothing there. But the feeling didn't go away, and after that day the truck stopped working. Just like that. I don't know what he did to it. I don't want to know. It didn't stop. If anything, it got worse. I started noticing things where they shouldn't be. Things that didn't belong to me, things I never touched, never wanted. But they kept showing up anyway. The first time it was a cheap plastic ring. Something from a vending machine, bright and childish. Sitting right there in my locker, like I was supposed to wear it. Like it meant something. I stared at it for a long time, trying to piece together how it got there. Maybe someone left it by mistake. Maybe someone was messing with me. But no one said anything. No one laughed. No whispered jokes behind my back. It was just there, waiting for me. Like a secret left in plain sight. Then came the notes. Small, folded slips of paper. Some blank. Some with a single heart drawn in sharp, obsessive lines. Others had words, short and simple, written in cramped handwriting. "Thinking about you. Did you get my last note? Why won't you talk to me?" I ignored them, stuffed them in my pockets, threw them away. But every time I tried to shake it off, another one would appear. Someone was putting them there. Someone was making sure I saw them. And then, the picture. At first I thought it was some mistake, something someone had dropped, but it wasn't. It was me. A photo of me, walking across the parking lot, my back turned. Another one, sitting in class, my face half hidden behind my sleeve. I didn't even know these photos existed. That's when it clicked. He had been taking them, watching me through his phone, through whatever he used, collecting pieces of me like I was some kind of project. I tried to count the ones in front of me, but my mind was already racing past them. How many more were there? How long had he been doing this? And why didn't I ever notice? It wasn't like I wanted to go to the counselor. I hadn't even told anyone. Not really. Maybe I thought if I kept ignoring it, it would stop. Maybe I thought if I just acted normal, things would go back to the way they were before. But someone must have noticed. A teacher, maybe. Or maybe it was just getting too obvious. So I got pulled into the office. For the first time I felt something close to relief. Like this was it. Finally someone was going to do something. I sat there, hands clenched together, stomach tight, waiting for the questions. Waiting for some kind of plan, some kind of help. Instead she smiled. A tired, practiced kind of smile. like she'd had this conversation before and already knew the answer. I got told that boys will be boys, that I should feel flattered, that it was normal, just a part of growing up. The words didn't make sense at first, like my brain refused to process them. This wasn't how these things were supposed to go. People were supposed to listen, to believe you when you said something was wrong, but she just kept talking, her voice calm and rehearsed, as if she was explaining a science lesson, and the worst part, I believed her. I don't know why. Maybe because I was a kid. Maybe because I wanted to believe that there was some explanation, something that made it less terrifying. Maybe because I didn't want to think about what it really meant, what it meant if no one was actually going to stop this. But my mom didn't buy it. I barely got the words out before she was already grabbing her keys, already heading for the school. She stormed into the principal's office, demanding answers, and they didn't have any. Just excuses, just apologies that didn't mean anything, just more nothing. It should have been a normal night. Just another quiet evening alone. My parents were out, and I was curled up on the couch, half watching something on my iPad. I don't even remember what. The kind of night where nothing happens. The kind that's supposed to feel safe. Then, the sound. A dull thud against the glass. Soft but deliberate. Then again, and again. My stomach twisted before I even checked. I didn't want to check. I already knew, but I still pulled back the curtain just enough to see. And there he was, Liam, standing below my window, barely moving, just staring. The porch light caught his face in this weird pale glow, his hand clutching a handful of rocks. I think he had more in his pockets. I think he had been standing there for a while. I didn't move. Couldn't. It felt like if I so much as breathed too loudly, something would snap. Some unspoken rule would break, and he'd do something worse. My pulse was in my throat. The whole house felt different, smaller, like the walls weren't thick enough to keep him out. Then my phone vibrated. Once, twice, 3 times, 4. I didn't even have to look. I knew it was him. When I finally checked, my hands felt like they weren't even mine. The messages were waiting, lined up in a row. Why did you leave? I just want to talk. I'm sorry, all I wanted was a kiss. You're not who I thought you were. Bye. I blocked him. I don't even remember doing it. I just know I did, because after that it was silence. No more messages. No more rocks. He never reached out again, but that didn't mean it was over, because I still had to see him, in the hallways, in the cafeteria, just existing, like none of it ever happened. And I let myself believe for a while that it was over, that maybe I had imagined how bad it was, that maybe I had overreacted, until one day the news spread. Liam had been arrested. No one knew why, or if they did, they didn't say. Just whispers, rumors, half-formed speculations that never quite pieced together. Some people seemed surprised, some didn't, but no one really talked about it. No one asked questions, and I should have felt relieved. I should have felt safe, but I didn't. Not really, because deep down I knew, whatever he had done, it wasn't the first time. I wasn't looking for anything serious, just swiping, mostly out of boredom, the way you do when you're alone and restless but don't want to admit it. That's how I met Owen. Nothing remarkable about him. Average face, decent smile, a few too many gym photos, but nothing that screamed run. We matched, I answered. It was something to do. The first date was coffee, a quick, impersonal kind of meeting, the way I liked it. No pressure, no expectations. He was fine, polite enough, normal enough. The kind of guy you forget the moment you walk away, which should have been my first clue. If someone leaves no real impression, maybe that's the only impression that matters. The second date was drinks. A little looser, a little longer. It felt fine, I think. Though now, looking back, I wonder if I was just too distracted to notice things. The way he laughed, too abrupt, too sudden, like he was waiting for the right moment to insert it. The way he lingered in silences, like he was cataloging something I didn't understand. I ignored it. Told myself I was imagining things. By the third date, dinner, the feeling had settled in, low, uneasy, but not enough to make me leave. I should have trusted it. The way he looked at me across the table, too still, too focused, like he was absorbing everything. The way he held onto words before speaking, like he was measuring them. I caught myself fidgeting, checking my phone more than usual. And yet, when the date ended, I let him kiss me. Not because I wanted to, but because rejecting him outright felt like more work than just going along with it. That was my mistake. And maybe, in a way, that was the moment everything started. By the fourth date, I already knew it wasn't going anywhere. Knew I didn't want it to. I should have canceled, should have just let it fade out the way these things usually do, but I didn't. Maybe I felt guilty. Maybe I just didn't want to deal with the awkwardness of rejecting someone outright, so I went. Same bar, same dim lighting, same sticky counters, same too loud music, but this time, I was paying attention. The way his hand found my arm, my knee, the small of my back, like it belonged there. The way he watched me when he thought I wasn't looking, like I was something to be figured out, solved. He drank too much. I noticed that too. The way his fingers curled tighter around his glass, the way his voice got louder, less careful. He laughed at nothing, at everything. Kept leaning in too close, kept trying to kiss me right there at the bar. I pulled away. He laughed, like it was a joke, but his hand stayed on my leg, heavy and warm and unmoving. I told him I was tired. It was an excuse, but not really. He laughed again, like he didn't believe me, like he thought I was playing hard to get. I wasn't. Outside, in the cold, under the flickering streetlights, he stopped me, just stood there in the empty parking lot, too close, asking if we could go home together. When I said no, he acted like he hadn't heard me. Tried again, then again, like if he asked enough times, the answer would change. I don't know how long it went on, only that eventually, I was in my car, hands tight on the wheel, heart beating too fast, and I knew, without a doubt, that I wouldn't be seeing him again. I got in my car, closed the door, and exhaled like I was letting go of something. I thought that was it. Just another bad date, just another awkward goodbye, but then I noticed the headlights. At first I didn't think much of it, just another car on the road heading the same direction. Coincidence. But then, 3 turns later it was still there, not too close, not too far. Just there. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was being paranoid, but my hands were tight on the wheel, my stomach knotting itself up in ways I couldn't ignore. At the next red light, I checked my mirror, looked closer. My stomach dropped. It was him. I texted him. Just something quick, something casual enough to feel like I wasn't panicking. "Are you following me?" The response came almost instantly, too fast. "Just making sure you get home." Okay, that should have reassured me. Should have made me feel safe, but it didn't. It made my skin crawl, made me feel like something was tightening around my chest. I called him, no answer, just the same car, same headlights, same wrong feeling. I pulled over, not because I knew what to do, not because I had a plan, just instinct, just fear. I texted him again, "Stop, I'm fine." Watched his car hesitate, slow down in the middle of the street, like he was thinking, like he was debating something. Then finally he kept going. I sat there for a long time, hands shaking against the steering wheel, watching his taillights disappear. But the feeling stayed, that tightness, that wrongness, like something had shifted, and I couldn't shift it back. The texts started that night. At first, just a few, annoying but nothing I hadn't seen before. Did I do something wrong? Had a great time, let's do something low-key next time. I ignored them. Then came the double texts. The follow-ups. Oh no, is the vibe dead? Then the shift. I woke up to a wall of messages. The tone had changed. The patience was gone. "You strung me along. 4 dates just to pull this? At least pay me back for everything I wasted on you." Blocked him. Didn't think twice. Thought that would be the end of it. But the calls started the next day. No caller ID. At first, I answered out of habit, expecting maybe a telemarketer, maybe a wrong number. Silence. Then, just as I was about to hang up, breathing, slow, controlled, listening, I felt sick. I stopped answering. The calls didn't stop. every few hours. Each time my phone lighting up with no caller ID. Letting one go to voicemail didn't help. When I finally checked, it was the same thing. Breathing, like he wanted me to know he was there, like he wanted me to hear him. It didn't matter what time of day it was. Mid-morning, late afternoon. Even once at 3 a.m. I started turning my phone on silent, just so I wouldn't have to see it light up in the dark. But I always knew when he called. A feeling crawled up the back of my neck every time, like he was standing just outside my line of sight. I tried telling myself it was nothing, just a bitter guy who didn't know how to take rejection. That's all, right? But that first night, after the 6th or 7th call, I felt something shift. I checked my front door. I checked the windows. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't overreacting. This was real. Something was wrong. Something was getting worse. For a while, I thought maybe it was over. The calls had slowed. No new numbers. No more voicemails. I let myself believe that maybe blocking had worked. That maybe he had gotten bored, moved on. I wanted to believe that. Then I came home and saw them, a bouquet of flowers, right there on my doorstep. At first, I just stood there, staring. My brain refused to catch up to what my eyes were seeing. It wasn't a big dramatic arrangement. Nothing flashy or obvious. Just a handful of carefully picked flowers, wrapped neatly in brown paper. But it didn't matter. It didn't matter that there was no note, no message, nothing explicitly tying them to him. I knew, somehow he knew where I lived. I didn't touch them, just stepped around them, went inside, locked the door, checked every window. It didn't make sense. I never told him my last name, never mentioned the area I lived in. How long had he known? Had he followed me before? Had he already been watching? The thought made my skin crawl. I texted him. One final message. Never contact me again. Never come near my house again, or I go to the police. Then I blocked him everywhere. But that didn't fix anything. Blocking him didn't erase the feeling that settled deep in my stomach. The quiet paranoia that followed me from room to room. He wasn't just some guy I went on a few dates with anymore. He wasn't just sending texts or calling from blocked numbers. He had stood outside my house. He had put something on my doorstep. He wanted me to see it. He wanted me to know. And the worst part, I still couldn't prove anything. I woke up to a noise. Not a dream, not my imagination. Something real. A soft creak. The kind wood makes when weight shifts against it. The house settling, maybe. That's what I told myself. But then, another sound. A door. Not mine. Upstairs. My stomach went cold. I reached for my phone, barely breathing, ears straining. The silence stretched, and I almost convinced myself I was wrong. But then something else. The whisper of drawers sliding open. Not violently, not in a rush. Someone was going through them. My things. I slipped out of bed, heart hammering so loud I thought it would give me away. I dropped to the floor, barely managing to pull myself under before my door opened. Slow, deliberate. Feet moved across the room. Then, my dresser. A quiet shuffle of papers. The soft click of something being set down, picked up again. And then, nothing. No more rummaging. Just quiet. Too quiet. And then the bed shifted. A weight pressing down, right above me. I clamped a hand over my mouth. Through the tiny gap between the floor and the mattress, I could see them. His shoes, just inches away. He wasn't searching anymore. He was sitting, waiting. I don't know how long he stayed there. A minute? 5? Longer? My muscles ached, locked in place, too afraid to move. And then, just when I thought I might break, he sighed. A soft, almost disappointed sound. Then a muttered word, something I couldn't make out. And then he stood. Footsteps again, crossing the room, moving down the stairs. The front door clicked shut. I didn't move. Not at first. Couldn't. I stayed there, shaking, waiting for some sign that he was still in the house, that this wasn't over. But the silence stretched. Only then did I crawl out, fingers barely working as I fumbled for my phone. I called the police, but even as I spoke, even as I tried to explain, I already knew he was gone. and they wouldn't find anything. By the time they arrived, he was gone. I knew he would be, even as I stood there shivering in my own living room, trying to explain what had happened. I knew they wouldn't find anything. No proof, no footprints, no fingerprints, just the windows unlocked. And I knew I had locked them. I knew it. They walked through the house, checked every room, asked if anything was missing. Nothing was. That was the worst part. He hadn't come to steal. He had come for something else, and I couldn't prove any of it. I filed a restraining order the next day. The officer said it was the best I could do. The best I could do. As if a piece of paper could stop someone like him. I never saw him again. Maybe he got bored. Maybe he moved on to someone else. Maybe he was watching me right now, just better at hiding. I changed my locks, put in cameras, moved my bed away from the door. But it didn't help, because the worst part wasn't knowing he had been inside. It was not knowing if he'd ever come back. Some nights, I still wake up at the smallest sound. A creak, a shift, my heart pounding until I'm sure I'm alone. But I never really feel alone. Not anymore. Maybe he's gone, or maybe he's just waiting for the right moment. I've always been better off alone, not in some dramatic, brooding way, just I don't fit, never have. I watch people move through life like they have a script. I never got. The easy way they slip into conversations, the way they laugh at the right moments, how they never seem to second guess their every move. I don't have that, never did. So I learned to live without it. It's not like I've never had friends. I have. A handful. The kind that actually meant something. Not just people to kill time with, but even those drifted, like everything else does. Life pulls people in different directions, and I've never been the type to hold on too tight. It's easier that way. Cleaner. Dating though, that's always been another level of complicated. It's one thing to stand on the edges of friendship, but romance, that's different. That's letting someone in too close, letting them see the gaps and fractures. I try not to look at myself. I've tried, sure, but it never sticks. Something always feels off, forced, like I'm acting out a role I don't fully believe in. So when I matched with Emily, I told myself not to overthink it. Maybe it was loneliness. Maybe I was just tired of hearing my own thoughts echo back at me. Whatever it was, I let it happen. I ignored the little things. The things that, looking back, I should have noticed. The small red flags that weren't even really flags. Just something. A feeling. A hesitation I brushed past because for once I wanted to see where it led. And for a while it felt good. Normal even. Until it didn't. For once someone was actually interested in me. Really interested. Not in a polite passing way, not out of convenience, but in a way that made me feel like I was something worth looking at, worth knowing. I wasn't used to that. Emily had this way of making me feel like the most important person in the room, even when I wasn't in it. She texted constantly, always checking in, always asking about my day, my thoughts, my plans. At first, it felt good, like maybe this was what I had been missing. Maybe this was how it was supposed to feel when someone actually cared. She made me feel wanted, and I didn't realize how much I craved that until I had it. The way she'd talk about me like I was fascinating, like she couldn't get enough of me, it was intoxicating. For once, I wasn't on the outside looking in. I was the center of someone's attention, so I ignored the way things escalated too quickly. The way she always wanted to know where I was, what I was doing, who I was with. I told myself it was just affection, just someone who really, really liked me. And when she started showing up, places I hadn't told her I'd be, times I hadn't invited her, I brushed it off. A coincidence, a sweet gesture, nothing to be alarmed about, because why would I question something I'd wanted for so long? The texts didn't stop. Every morning, every night, every hour in between. At first, they felt like attention, like someone who just wanted to be close to me. But attention has a weight to it, and hers started to feel suffocating. If I didn't reply fast enough, she'd send another, and another. Then came the questions, the little jabs hidden beneath concern. Where are you? Why didn't you answer? Are you ignoring me? It wasn't playful, it wasn't teasing. It was possessive. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was overreacting. But then came the demands. She wanted to know where I was. All the time. I told her she didn't need to know that. She laughed it off, said it was just for peace of mind. If I had nothing to hide, why wouldn't I share my location? I hesitated, and then somehow, I gave in. Maybe because it was easier than arguing. Maybe because I didn't want to lose the feeling of being wanted, even when it had started to twist into something else. But then the night at my friend's house. God, I should have seen it coming. My phone had been silent for a while. I hadn't checked her messages, and suddenly she was just there. In the driveway, pacing, waiting. When I stepped outside, she was furious. Not sad, not hurt, furious. I don't remember what I said to calm her down. I don't even remember how the night ended. I just remember the sinking feeling in my gut. The undeniable certainty that this wasn't normal. I ended it over text the next day, a coward's way out. But I was afraid of what she'd say, what she'd do, if I told her in person. The calls didn't stop. At first I ignored them. My phone buzzed relentlessly, the same name flashing over and over. I blocked her number. A new one replaced it. Blocked again. Another. It felt endless. Then came the pounding on my door. The first time I convinced myself it was just my imagination, that the sound was someone else's visitor, some random noise from the street. But then it happened again. Louder, more urgent. I stood frozen in my apartment, barely breathing, while she screamed my name from outside. Her voice was raw, furious, echoing through the hallway like something unhinged. I didn't move, didn't make a sound. Eventually she left. That was when I turned off location sharing. Her messages changed after that. The desperation was gone. The sadness too. What replaced it was something colder, calculated. She didn't ask where I was anymore. She told me, sent messages about my workplace, my friends, places I'd been, places I hadn't told her about. I started sleeping with my bedroom door locked, not that it would have helped. A week passed, the first time I'd felt any kind of relief. No calls, no knocks, no messages. For the first time in months, I actually let myself believe it was over. Then, one night, lying in bed, I heard something, a shift in the air, a creak from the hallway inside my apartment. My blood turned to ice. I wasn't alone. I called the police with shaking hands, barely able to get the words out. There was someone inside. I knew it. I could still feel it, that weight in the air, the kind that only exists when you're not alone. By the time they arrived, the apartment was dead silent. No more creaks, no shifting shadows, just me, standing there like some paranoid lunatic, my heart still hammering against my ribs. They searched everything: the kitchen, the bedroom, the bathroom, closets, under the bed, every possible hiding spot. Nothing. The officers asked if I was sure, if I'd actually seen anything. I hadn't. Just a sound, just a feeling. They were polite about it, but I could tell, the looks they exchanged, the barely hidden skepticism in their voices. To them, I was just some overworked, anxious guy who probably mistook his own apartment settling for an intruder. But I wasn't imagining it. I felt someone in there with me. When they left, I locked every door, every window. I checked the closets again, even though I'd watched them do the same thing minutes earlier. I barely slept, jumping at every little sound, every flicker of shadow in the dim glow of the streetlights outside. For a few days I tried to convince myself they were right, that maybe stress had finally gotten to me. Maybe I'd let my paranoia spiral out of control. But deep down, I knew better. I don't know when I finally drifted off. I remember lying there, staring at the ceiling, phone clutched tight in my hand, telling myself it was over, that she was gone, that the apartment was empty except for me. I must have slept. Maybe for minutes, maybe for hours. But then, light, a soft glow cutting through the darkness. My phone screen. I turned my head, throat dry, pulse already speeding up before I even saw the name. Emily. Message after message, rolling in too fast to process. Wake up. Another. Wake up. My chest tightened. I swallowed hard, fingers stiff as I reached for the phone. Wake up. Something moved. Not outside. Inside. The closet door. It burst open. A shape lunged forward. A rush of movement, too fast, too sudden for my sleep-heavy brain to fully process. Emily. She was inside. Inside my apartment. Inside my room. I didn't even get a full glimpse before the light caught something in her hand. A glint. A sharp edge. I didn't think. I reacted. Rolled off the bed, hit the floor hard, pain jolting up my arm. She was already coming toward me, her breathing ragged, too fast, like she'd been waiting for this. I scrambled backward, fingers clawing at the floor, pushing myself toward the door. She was talking, no, shouting, but the words barely registered. I wrenched the door open and threw myself through it. She was right behind me. The knife, a knife, sliced through the air where I'd just been. Too close, too damn close. I slammed the door shut, threw my weight against it. The first impact shook the frame. The second drove the blade through the wood, inches from my face. I sucked in a breath, heart hammering against my ribs. She was screaming, hysterical, words pouring out, half threats, half something else. I did the only thing I could. I lied, told her I still cared, that I'd made a mistake, that I'd come back, said anything to slow her down. I don't even remember calling the cops, but suddenly there were sirens, flashing lights, and then the moment came. She hesitated, just for a second. I lunged, the door burst open, and I shoved forward, knocking her off balance. Then hands, not mine, grabbed her, yanked her back. The cops. She was screaming my name as they dragged her away, and I just stood there, shaking, staring at the splintered door, the gashes where the knife had torn through. She'd been in my closet. She'd been inside all along. I should feel safe now. That's what everyone keeps telling me. She's gone. It's over. You can move on now. But I don't feel safe. The locks don't feel secure enough. The doors and windows, I check them, then check them again, but it doesn't matter. The silence in my apartment isn't comforting. It's suffocating. Too thick. Too unnatural, like something is just waiting to break it. Nights are the worst. That's when my mind replays everything. The sound of my closet door creaking open. The flicker of my phone screen lighting up in the dark. The glint of the knife. The way she said my name, her voice raw, broken, furious. I tell myself she's in jail, that they wouldn't just let someone like that go, that she won't come back. But I don't actually know that. And that's the problem. Because sometimes when I pass a window or glance at the peephole in my door, I hesitate. What if she's out there? What if she never left? I can't shake the feeling that I'm still being watched. Like any second now, I'll hear something. A creak, a breath, or maybe I won't. Maybe I'll never see her again. Maybe that should make me feel better. It doesn't.